Hey everyone, David here, and I've got some exciting news to share. I've decided to write a book, and I've entitled it Psychosocial Hazards Are Real. The book is intended to help clarify the fact that psychological safety cannot be achieved without paying attention to the psychosocial hazards people are being exposed to. Despite how much individuals might be interested in treating others with kindness, dignity, and respect, many cultures are so full of psychosocial traps that no psychological health and safety effort can ultimately succeed. But to address psychosocial hazards, you first have to know what they are, and you have to have some idea what to do to address them. Though the book won't be 100% complete until the spring of 2025, I'd like to share a unique opportunity to reserve a copy during the book presale campaign. The campaign will run from September 16th to October 18th, 2024. This will be an opportunity to get one of the first copies of the book, tickets to the book launch event, and other opportunities to learn more about psychosocial hazards. For more information, you can go to my personal LinkedIn or Facebook page, or the LinkedIn, Facebook, or webpage for ID2 Solutions. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity. Now, back to this episode of the podcast. In 2020, the murder of George Floyd resulted in what was described as a racial reckoning that rippled across the globe. However, since that time, many organizations have rethought or in some cases totally backed away from their commitments to racial and social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. A question that DEI practitioners have to consider is whether they can be psychologically healthy and safe in this new reality. We'll be talking with a returning guest about DEI Backlash up next on this episode of the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each week, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk psychological health and safety. Welcome to this week's Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. So the backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI efforts, can be attributed to several factors. Some people misunderstand DEI initiatives, believing that they lead to reverse discrimination or exclusion, rather than fostering true inclusion. There's a perception among some that employees involved in DEI initiatives benefit more than other groups in terms of expense and the expense of others, so that one group might benefit, leading to feelings of being left out or disadvantaged. DEI efforts have been politicized, and with some viewing them as a part of a broader cultural and ideological agenda. Early enthusiasm for DEI sometimes led to rushed implementations and vague descriptions or definitions which failed to address the deeper systemic issues. And organizations fear lawsuits, financial repercussions, and other issues, leading some to scale back or quietly discontinue their DEI efforts without publicizing them. But what about the DEI practitioners that were brought into organizations over the past, especially over the past 5 years? How are they feeling? What's going on in their lives? How are they going to take care of their own psychological health and safety as the landscape has shifted? Well, that's our conversation today, and I have a unique opportunity, someone who's actually been on the podcast before. We were having some dialogue about some other issues, and I thought, hey, great person to bring back and talk about how things are going. So we're going to start, again, for those of you who may not have met my guest, want to give the opportunity, as I so often do, with an introduction of my guest by my guest, in this case with this question: who is Sahca Thompson?
Oh, wow. First of all, thank you for having me back on. Who is Sasha Thompson? So, I am a daughter, I am a partner, I am a bonus mom, I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, I am um, a giver, I am a community supporter. That just so happens to be the founder of the Equity Equation, which is a diversity, well, an inclusive culture consultancy and coaching program, a group in the DC area, in Washington, DC area. I am a believer in psychological safety, and we can definitely dive into that because that is what is going to be in the forefront of what we're going to see for the next several years. Because if we do not feel that we can speak up, and if we have an administration that is wanting to squash voices or only want to hear certain voices, that is going to impact how we show up, not just at work, but in the world. And so I really think that everything that we discuss goes so much further than the workplace. And so that's, yeah, I'm excited to unpack that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, you've answered this question before, but I'll let you answer it again to see maybe if your thoughts have evolved or maybe they're still as steadfast as they once were. What does psychological health and safety mean to you?
Ooh. So it has morphed just a little bit in that I still believe about psychological safety being the ability to be able to speak up, challenge the status quo, being able to come up with new and innovative ideas without fear, without retribution, without harm. However, I do want to ensure that the voices of those that have been marginalized is also a part of that. They're not seen as anomalies. They're not seen as just the outliers. Their voices are heard, valued, seen, connected. They feel connected to what is happening as well, because that their experiences matter just as much as anyone else. And so, when I think about psychological safety now, I really look at it from, does everyone feel this way? Or is it the majority that feels this way and everyone else is an outlier? Because I've seen a lot of that happening. And so ensuring that even those anomalies are included in that conversation.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that one. It's my observation and experience that everything is psychologically healthy and safe for whoever created it. Because if I come up with it, it works great for me. It works perfect for me. The challenge is when I involve anybody else. Will that be one person or 1,000 people? Again, the other belief I have is that you can get psychological safety sometimes by accident. I mean, it wasn't really intentional. It just you bring a group of people who have similar backgrounds, similar views of the world, and this is not a judgment on those values or anything. It's just we kind of see things the same. So when we get together, of course, it's safe again for us. The question is it safe for everyone? And is that intentional? I also don't believe that any space can be 100% psychologically safe for everybody. It just can't be. I mean, I can't, I don't think it's possible. You can make attempts, you can work towards it, but it's not going to inherently be perfect for somebody else just because we're two different people.
Right. It's funny. I was doing a session yesterday, and I was sharing with them. I am not a fan of that whole. Oh, this is a safe space, and I'm like, you can't guarantee that, because what is safe for you or what you need in order for it to be safe may not be safe for me. And so that aligns so well with what you're saying. Psychological safety is the same thing. I was like, you need to define what you need in order to be psychologically safe, which may or may not be the same as the person next to you. And I always say to folks, just remember, just because we're in the same place at the same time doesn't mean we got here the same way. And so, taking all of those experiences, that is going to shape how we see the environment that we're in and how the environment sees us, right? And so that is going to lead to, okay, is it even possible for this space to be psychologically safe for me? based on everything else that is going on here.
Right. So yes, absolutely, absolutely. So you're a guest on episode 32, which was about a little over 2 years ago, and a lot has happened in the last couple of years. I mean, an awful lot. And I'd encourage people to go back and watch that episode if they, want to see some of what was going on with you then. But so, from your perspective, and again, from a primarily from a DEI perspective, but in any other area, what's your assessment of what's happened in the last few years?
Oh, how much time do we have?
We've got close to an hour, so go for it.
I think it's several different things that is happening, right? One, I think, this attack on DEI, which was started with, critical race theory. You notice we're not hearing anything about CRT anymore because it was kind of debunked. Like that happens at the university level, right? In law schools. So that kind of went away, but it stayed within education for a bit. And then now it's this DEI, anti-DEI. And so this is just Sacha's way of looking at the world. When you think of what DEI is supposed to be, it is about providing opportunities to folks that are underrepresented so that they have access to the same opportunities, jobs, whatever it is that everyone else has, right? So it's not about lowering the bar or lowering any standards, which is what opponents of DEI are saying, right? We are seeing an interesting time happening right now when we have folks that are being put up in some very high positions in the country that have zero qualifications other than being white and male, right? So if we don't want to use race or gender to put someone in a position, but that's what's qualifying this person for this position, is it really about DEI, right? So when I started really thinking about this, and folks might get their feelings hurt, but I'm all right with that. It's really a threat to power because when you open up access, when you provide opportunities to people that are underrepresented, but are highly talented, highly educated, now you have competition, right? And so what was allowed to happen as mediocre before now has to raise up to a standard that they didn't have to before, right? And so they're losing out on jobs and positions because they have to be now at a level playing field where it was never level to begin with, right? So that I think is a big part of that pushback is mediocrity is being challenged. Power is now in play, right? Because now you're seeing these individuals with positions of power trying to shape and mend, right? We're hearing all of this about oligarchies right now. It's all about consumerism. It's all, it's a class war. It's all of these other things. And so they have you focused on the shiny thing that is DEI but all these other things are starting to happen and take place. And so what is fascinating to me, I was sharing with someone this morning that my last corporate job was in tech. And one of the big projects that I wanted to get off the ground and was able to get off the ground was a grant program for underrepresented technologists. And we have a huge conference. We had a huge conference at the end of every year. And I was like, you know what? I want to be able to get underrepresented technologists to this conference. What are the barriers? Cost, right? So if I pay for your hotel and your airfare to get here and your the pass to get into this conference, right? Let me remove those barriers. What will happen? We had over 100 technologists from around the world come to this conference. And I will never forget one gentleman coming up to me and he was saying, I always felt that I was an imposter, but I'm here and I'm realizing that I know more than so many of the people that are on the stage here. But because they had access, they had opportunity, they were rubbing elbows with the people that they needed to know how to get on those stages. He was like, I'm not the problem. I was like, you were never the problem. You were never the problem. And so DEI is about opportunity and access. And when we have opportunity and access, Now there's competition. It is not just assumed that a certain group will be able to lead and move forward, and because of who they know in those networks, right? Rarely do we talk about cronyism and nepotism, but we talk about racism, we talk about gender bias, we talk about those things, but we don't challenge nepotism and cronyism, right? Other than like legacy admissions at the college level. So I think what we're going to start to see are people's eyes opening to, wow, okay, this wasn't about DEI. This was about power. This was about the mediocrity being put in positions of power to continue that cycle through cronyism and nepotism. And it's not about being the best. It's not about having the most education, because we already know, especially Black women, most educated group in this country, yet at the bottom of the totem pole. And so I think 2025 will be very eye opening for a lot of people. Um, I think with DEI practitioners, many of them are kind of in this wait and see phase of what their organization is going to do. Some organizations have already made statements internally of what their position is going to be, and they're going to continue to move forward. Some have been public, like Costco, excuse me, Apple, some others that have come out and said, no, we're going to continue to move forward. Our shareholders are saying this is what we want, even though the board might have something else in mind. But again, that goes back to power, right? The board has the power, but the shareholders have the power. And so if it's the bottom line, and if it's about the dollar, you're going to go where you're going to not be cutting your hand off in order to make some money. So I think this is going to be for DEI practitioners a wait and see, a shift to, okay, how do we continue making this work um, without necessarily using those three letters?
Yeah, no, I find that a lot of folks who have difficulty with the three letters also have this kind of zero sum approach to virtually everything. They believe that the pie is limited, and it's only limited from their view because not everybody sees the pie as so limited. So a story I tell is, I can't recall exactly what year it was, but probably 2020 thereabouts, maybe 21. There was a webinar I watched that included three of the Fed chairs from the Federal Reserve Bank. And at the time, the only non-white Fed chair was here in the Atlanta area, and he's still in place. And I'll you remember certain things, and I can't quote exactly what he said, but he said something to the effect that trillions, and I think the number was about $3 trillion in economic activity have been lost due to discrimination, because the person who brought the idea forward was a person of color, was disabled, was gay, was whatever, and it didn't fit the traditional model, so it was discarded. And think of all of the innovation that we have today that was at the root of something that somebody, post-it notes, or you pick your thing that somebody rejected that turned out to be a pretty decent idea that made somebody a lot of money. And so that whole zero sum idea is totally, in my view, totally in conflict with those people who say they want to make money, because despite everything that has been done systemically to make sure we have income inequality, folks have figured out how to make enough money to spend billions of dollars. And and again, my money spends just like yours does. And I'm not, independently wealthy either, but I do have some, and I have choices as to where I spend my resources and where I invest my time. And if you don't want it, somebody out there is smart enough to figure out that they want my consumerism.
And when we talk about psychological safety, when you're in environments that are psychologically safe, that's where innovation happens. And so when you create these environments of fear and status quo, and we only live in this box. This is our culture. It has to be a culture fit, which is all mindset things around supremacy culture, but that's a whole other podcast for a whole other day. But when you think in this very finite, narrow box, right, innovation will never happen. And I think what's happening with TikTok is a great example of that, because here you have an app that, though the data is stored in the United States, that is outside of the United States and allowed people to be in community. I have never seen one so much community building and people sharing and creativity exploring that has happened, right? Kind of in that space. What is the ban that is happening right now is because we don't control it, right? We don't control the data or the creativity, or we can't hold them in this particular box. And so what's fascinating to me is we have this younger generation who has always been very global, like they've come out, tech phones were connected to their hands basically, right? So they are used to seeing a more global way of seeing the world, have now gone to another app that is based in China, right? And realizing like, oh my gosh, all this technology, all of these new things. And the quote that I saw yesterday, and I was just like, wow, is as much as we feel that this country is innovative and, having the best of the best, that exposure on that app, they said, we think that, we are doing all of these great things and China is living in 2050. No, they're living in 2025. We're the ones living in 1995. Right? Like we are actually behind because of that mindset of it has to be controlled and in this box, and we need to use fear, and we need to, it's the plantation mentality, right? And that's how we need to drive our workers to think and to be and to work. And in a psychologically safe place, all of those barriers are removed, right? And so if you imagine an organization where people can just be and think and create and be in community, because again, supremacy mindset is about individualism, and the global majority is about community. We naturally do that. We naturally think of community. So it's fascinating to me, and I guess this is the sociologist in me too, to watch this war between individualism and collectivism, and to understand that we will only get to a better place when our ideas can come together, when we can be in community, when we can share, when you have an idea and I have an idea and we're like, oh, wait a minute. Right? Like if we put those two things together, right, what else could happen? And that is what I think is going to be the biggest challenge, because that's how small businesses occur, right? That's how we start to see some of these partnerships and things start to blossom and bloom in ways that we never expected, because we're thinking outside of the box. But if we think outside of the box, then the oligarchs can't control it.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
The conversation about collectivism, I think, is really important because, again, to your point, we in the United States have been sold this, in my view, bill of goods that, we're the best at everything. We're the best at a few things, but we're not the best at everything. It's not possible. for any group of people to be the best at everything. It's just not. It's just not. And that's actually okay. I don't have to be the best at everything. I'd like to be pretty decent at a few things, but nobody has the time to be exceptional at everything. And so this, and on top of that, we wash away those examples where we're not. Pick every single competitive sport, particularly the ones that we watch on TV, the ones that make bazillions of dollars. Each and every one of those started out as an exclusive club that only allowed certain people in. And so it was easy to say that they had the record at whatever because they didn't really allow competition. There was a bit of a